And we're right back live in the studio of WLCN. Viewpoint is the program. Our guest this morning is John Corneille, and we're here to talk about the matter of blindness. And John's only a successful attorney. He's very, very involved in these professional organizations that are here to fight blindness. We're going to talk about Vision Walk, but we're going to turn the mic over back to John and let him just take his cue as to what he would like to talk about and what's going on in research and what he's involved with. Mr. Corneille.
Thanks, Bill. Well, I think, first of all, I want to let people know about and become aware of the Foundation Fighting Blindness, because my guess is that the millions and millions of people that are listening this morning, none of them have ever heard of it. And I say that from personal experience because I do a number of speaking engagements up around DeKalb to Lions Clubs and other service organizations and church groups. And I always ask that question of who's in the audience, of who has ever heard of the Foundation Fighting Blindness. And unless somebody happens to be in the visual awareness field, like a teacher of the visually impaired or something, nobody ever raises their hand. Of course, I wouldn't see it if they did anyway, so I ask them to clap their hands or something. But it's because the foundation does not spend its money on advertising and marketing. It spends money directly on its mission, which is to find preventions, treatments, and cures for retinal degenerative diseases. And the retinal degenerative diseases, we've touched on a couple of them. What I have, retinitis pigmentosa. The one that everyone's heard about is macular degeneration. There's another form of kind of a juvenile form of macular degeneration, which is called Stargardt's disease. There's another one that is essentially the eye disease I have coupled with hearing loss, which is called Usher's syndrome, and Leber's congenital amaurosis, which is a childhood, even more rare form of retinitis pigmentosa. Those are the major ones in the family of retinal degenerative diseases. The foundation was formed in 1971. It's headquartered in Columbia, Maryland. It is very much a volunteer-driven organization, and I have become aware of that even more so through my volunteer work and my part-time staff status now. We have approximately 7 offices across the United States. The one in the Midwest is up in Vernon Hills, Illinois, not too far from DeKalb. We have 50 volunteer chapters across the United States. And the one thing that's, to me, is very impressive about this organization is not only the compassion and passion and dedication of the people that work there and the volunteers that I've met all over the country, is the fact that historically 75 to 80% of every dollar donated to the foundation goes directly into research and educational awareness. And if you look at the track record of some other charitable organizations, I don't think they can say that.
No.
And we also, the board of directors, long time ago, made a decision to not establish an endowment fund. So we hear about these large endowment funds, billion-dollar endowment funds in some of the Ivy League schools, for example, that are great, but as we know, you can't touch that money. You can only use the money that is earned off of the endowment fund.
Yes.
So the board at the foundation decided that, everybody works hard for their money. We do not want to ask for gifts for research to pile into an endowment fund. We want to funnel that right back into our mission. And that makes us suffer a little bit if somebody goes to charitynavigator.com, which is one way to rate charitable organizations. We have fought that for years and years. They believe in their criteria that the lack of an endowment fund shows some instability in the organization, and that's very, very frustrating to the board. But they're not going to change their position on that. So great track record of how the money is used. And really with these retinal diseases, up until the last 5 or 10 years or so, the diseases were pretty much in control. That has changed dramatically. We talked about the bionic chip, but a few years ago, the groundbreaking medical research that was done, funded by the foundation, involved some children that had this Leber's congenital amaurosis that I mentioned to you. They were involved in a human clinical trial through Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, where they identified the defective gene that was causing the vision loss. And it is a genetic defect in all these retinal diseases. There's a bad gene. So with this trial, they found out which gene was causing the vision loss. They then determined a way to create a healthy gene in the laboratory in one of those Petri dishes that we used to use in high school. And then they had to figure out how to get that healthy gene into the retina, so they injected it into the eye, a single injection in a hypodermic needle. They attached it to a virus, believe it or not, that migrated its way back to the retina, and within a matter of days, these children were seeing better. The boy in particular that's on all the videos at the foundation, he used a cane like I do. He was 10 years old. He was not playing baseball or football or anything with his buddies because he couldn't. When he came to the big announcement in Philadelphia of his improvement, he got up from his seat in the dark auditorium, threw his cane away, and walked up to the stage unguided.
No kidding.
He's now playing baseball with his buddies. He's playing soccer. That was a few years ago. He had his second eye injected, and it had the same result. So that proved that replacing a gene or gene therapy works to restore sight. There was also some breaking news out of UCLA a year or so ago about some clinical trials funded partly by the Foundation for Macular Degeneration. And some of the people that participated in that have shown some improvement, and that's through stem cells. So we hear about stem cells, unfortunately, oftentimes for political reasons, but that really is where most of the scientists and research feel that the meaningful cures are going to come from, are stem cells, gene replacement therapy. In the meantime, these great devices, these mechanical devices to help us get by day to day, because we can't just sit around in our homes waiting.
No, and obviously you've not done that.
I have not done that. Now, I have to be candid in that I've had my down days. I think we all do. Everybody has their issues, right? Everyone has who has a health issue. You have your bad days and your down days. But really, this getting involved with the foundation, I would say, turned my life around. I met so many people that are positive thinkers, people with vision loss that have accomplished things in their life and are there dealing with the same thing that I'm dealing with. And I know they have bad days too, but when we gather together or we email each other or we talk on the telephone, we bring each other's spirits up. And that's another huge, huge component, not part of the mission, but a benefit nonetheless of people getting involved with the foundation.
John, if you'll allow, I would like to go back your personal experience in going through law school or going to college, period, with this sort of a handicap. That had to be difficult.
It was difficult. Now, my visual acuity was still good enough that I could pick up a textbook and read it. I could sit in a classroom and, dare I say, look at a chalkboard, because I don't think those are used anymore. But I could do that.
Oh, you could.
I could. And I was still playing. I went to Illinois Wesleyan. I graduated from there in 1981. And I played baseball there until my junior year. And I still had the cataracts, and I had no business being on a baseball field. So that part of it was even more difficult. But the social aspect of college and all of that, I think, was probably the most challenging, because I did not talk to others about my vision loss. I was hiding it from others, which was not uncommon in those days. It's less common now. People are much more open with their disabilities and their physical challenges than they used to be. So the parties at night and all the social aspects that go along with being in college were sometimes even traumatic for me.
Yeah, I remember a couple of traumatic parties myself.
Yeah, they
had
were.
Nothing to do with blindness or vision.
I always tried to have the parties in my room, where I was familiar and I knew where the restroom was, and I knew where I had to be.
In your profession, does your practice take you into courtrooms?
It used to, almost on a daily basis.
Really?
Yes, and in 2005, I left my law firm because the vision had become so debilitating that I really didn't feel I could be a productive member of the firm, and I really didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't even know how to type back then. I never had typing in high school or college. I thought I was too cool to do that. I wasn't too cool. I just thought that I was. So that was a pretty pivotal point in my life, was the fall of 2005. I left my firm. I went into Chicago to a school for the blind to learn how to type, to learn how to use a cane, to learn how to use the software that's on my computer that takes, Bill, you and I emailed a little bit before I came down here. My computer was talking to me with everything that you wrote.
No monitor.
And I have a monitor, but I don't turn it on.
Surely.
And when I typed back to you, my keyboard was telling me what keys I was striking. So I lived in this school for 5 months. It was pretty difficult. I was away from my family. I came home on the weekends and tried to practice law out of my house. And it was made up of a lot of inner city people who had much more difficult life than I ever had. My roommate, for example, had lost his eyesight from gunshot wounds in a gang war. And his story was much more common than mine. I mean, I was far and away the most educated person there. I was far and away, I probably was the only one that had a job and the only one with any real hope of moving on in the future. Most of the people that were in there were just glad to get off the streets. So it was quite a unique experience for me, but it really did turn things around for me. It told me that I could function and still be a lawyer. I've changed my practice significantly since then, and particularly now that I have my duties with the foundation as director of gift planning. But I've pretty much gotten away from going into court. I pick and choose carefully what cases I take. I'm managing it better.
Judith K., for those of us who get up every day, go about our mundane lives, we tend to forget, and understandably so, there are people who get up every day and face huge challenges.
But John has risen above all those things.
Absolutely.
You hear always that if one of your senses is impaired, that nature will help you with your other senses being heightened. You are one sharp cookie, bud. You really are.
We can let his mother smile from ear to ear on that. That's allowable.
She hasn't rolled her eyes too much yet?
No.
I'm sure she never does.
Well, she was afraid if I really started talking about the parties, then the eyes would roll.
Well, I noticed she did kind of perk up a little bit when we went to some college parties.
Well, Judy, the census part of it, and I get that question a lot, and I really don't know if they improve. I think maybe you concentrate and focus on them more.
Yes, maybe.
And I know I've got some hearing issues too, going back to those parties with the loud stereos and things in high school and college. But I am much more aware of the sense of touch, my hearing. I walk to my office. It's only about a half a mile from my house. I walk there in the dark every morning, and I can sense if someone is around me. I can, if somebody's smoking a cigarette, obviously I can smell that. So if I'm walking up on a parked car, I can feel I can feel that I'm walking up on something. So I slow down a little bit and try to find it with my cane. So I don't know exactly how all that works, but I think there is some truth to it.
The technology that I've seen with Bill's wife, Jean, is so amazing. Are you able to avail yourself of all this technology? She has a thing that when she goes to the grocery store, it will tell her Campbell's tomato soup, 99 cents. And a thing on the kitchen table.
Yeah. Well, she has one of those huge magnifiers on the table that enables her to function as far as reading is concerned.
She can read the paper, or a magazine, or a book.
I mean, yes, to answer your question, I use a lot of that, and I mean, there's no better time to have this type of challenge in your life than right now, because there is just an incredible amount of devices, some simple, inexpensive, some a little bit more complex and pretty expensive. But the thing that I really want to hope that people listening can get out of this is that if you're struggling with vision loss, you don't have to struggle. You just need to reach out and find the resources that are available. Somebody told me one time that there are over 100 agencies in the state of Illinois that provide some sort of resource and service to the visually impaired.
Would you think, John, that those that are visually impaired, like with any other medical problem, rather than have all these divergent agencies, if they could kind of coalesce and maybe work, and maybe they do work together in a vicarious way, but just really literally get together and concentrate their efforts, as opposed to this agency and that agency. Am I correct in that assumption?
You're 100% correct, because ironically the person who told me about the 100 agencies was in one of those agencies, and she didn't know half of the ones that existed. So that really kind of speaks volumes about what's going on. But the bigger point again is that if some of the more expensive equipment, there's a program in the state of Illinois, for example, that will provide low interest loans or even grants sometimes for some of this equipment that's a little more expensive. You can sometimes get it donated by your local Lions clubs and all other kinds of service organizations that are just out there, willing and able and ready to help. But so many people, they don't take advantage of that. They won't register with the foundation at their website because they don't want to get all the mailings and everything.
Yeah.
But you're shorting yourself, because it's like any other medical problem. You have to be aggressive. You have to be proactive on any medical issue that you have, because if there's a cure found for macular degeneration, well, yes, you'll probably hear that one all over the news. But nobody's going to call you, Bill. No one's going to call your wife and say, hey, Jean, just wanted to let you know there's a cure and you can go to your local retinal specialist and sign up. And no, she and others need to be proactive and very much aware of what's going on.
I wanted to recount something that to me was good. I have a weird sense of humor, but in any event, I went to a program down in Springfield here a couple of years ago for a seminar for folks who are visually impaired, and some markedly so, such as yourself, some with their dogs, some with their canes and so forth. And anyway, we went to this church down there, and the presenter was an ophthalmologist. And I'm darned if he didn't show a slideshow, John.
Oh.
And I'm sitting there thinking, and I turned to the lady behind me, whom I did not know at all, and I said, Madam, am I missing something here? And she says, I don't know what the hell's going on.
Well, it's funny you say that, because we have, at the foundation, we have lots of educational symposium that we put on all over the country, and lots of times there will be PowerPoint presentations, and I've even gotten involved in helping to educate some of the staff that, yes, there are a lot of people in the room that are sighted and can take advantage of that, but the others, Bill, are just like you described, and not only can they not see what's going on, they get frustrated. And all it takes is for that ophthalmologist that you spoke about to describe what's on the screen. It's not hard to do, and then the person who can't see not only gets an idea of what's there, but also feels like the presenter cares and is in tune with the issue. That's pretty funny.
We're not quite out of time yet, but 648-5510. There might be somebody out there who has a visual problem, sight impaired, and if they have some questions of John Corneille, certainly feel free to call us. We may have an even fudge or two on a minute or two on the other end of the program if that should happen. But now we have here in Logan County, Gene goes to a visually impaired group that they meet once a month here at the First Christian Church, as it turns out. And they get together and somebody comes in and talks to them or presents something new and so forth. Kind of an ad hoc little group gets together. It's kind of a self-support thing. And she finds that helpful.
Well, I think it's very important because of the emotional impact that vision loss can have upon a person, to have people that you can talk to. And when I got to the point in my life where I could not hide my vision loss anymore and had to reach out to people, and of course I found out the good in people, that the vast majority of people are extremely understanding and compassionate and willing to help. It was as if the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. And now networking with so many other people across the country that have these same experiences, it just makes a huge difference. So, and I want to make sure that I give the website out if I could for the foundation.
Yeah, we'll take yes.
Because it's really, all you have to do is go to the website. It's a wealth of information. You can sign up, which just basically means you give your information either to receive mailings through the postal mail or by email. But it's fightblindness.org. I don't think you have to use the www anymore, but you can if you want.
No.
So www.fightblindness.org. And I'll give my personal cell phone number if somebody has any questions or wants to call or needs to be guided as how to sign up. It's area code 815-739-1711. So it's 739-1711. And I just really encourage anyone, if you have macular degeneration, even in your family, that has been proven to be genetic. So you are much more at risk of getting it in the future. There are certain lifestyle things that you can be doing now if you're in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, as far as diet, different things that you can do to maybe give you another 5 or 10 years. And believe me, if I had 5 or 10 years of good vision left right now, I'd kill for it. Not literally speaking, of course. It's not that bad.
Do you have a final question you'd like to ask Judy Kay?
No, I could just listen to John all day because you're so positive. And you're so positive about the genetic component in this. It must just make you sick that it's such a political football.
Well, it is. I mean, we can get into a long debate about what government should and should not be doing for us. I mean, the elderly in our country have a very, the disabled and very old have very difficult problems and that type of thing. But I don't like to see these things politicized, although I think that the arguments are legitimate to talk about. But the big thing is that there is hope. And I just view, even if there's nothing for me, I feel that everybody that is part of our country, and I don't want to get on a soapbox too much, but we have an obligation to the next generation. And Bill, I know that I believe you served our country, and you were in Springfield last night as part of that honor. And that's something that I never had to do. And I can't even imagine the sacrifices that you and others in your generation have made going to war to fight for the freedoms that we have. So in some way, I think we all have an obligation to leave this world a better place than the way it was when we got here.
Our guest this morning has been John Corneille. A very short 45 minutes, and we could have gone along longer, but John has a very important meeting to get to in Springfield, and Mr. Ash also runs a station with an iron fist, and he shuts us off, so it's as simple as that. We really appreciate your time this morning, John. We know you kind of squeezed us in here this morning, but for a very, very important discussion about physical ability to see, which is, of course, one of our God-given rights. We think so. John and millions of others work in a different world than you and I do. Bev, thank you very much for bringing your son up with us this morning. We appreciate it. We appreciate being alerted to the fact that John was going to be here. This is going to be one of our premier programs, Mrs. Busby. Thank you for Viewpoint.